Well, it was inevitable that some individual would have the courage to take the system on, just as it was inevitable that the system would then buckle. I noted an interesting piece today by a lecturer at the Sydney Law School, Jason Chin, now a disturbing metaphor of the problem. He relates how he was sitting alone in Redfern Park in Sydney, preparing to teach a law lecture. The police told him he had to be actively exercising to be there. He wrote, and I quote, "That experience, however, clarified for me just how grossly imbalanced the system is. I had every resource one could ask for, legal training, advice, time and money, but the process was still dangerous and unnecessary." He writes, "My experience resembled that of many others who were illegally ticketed. I was reading alone in the park, less than a kilometre from home. I looked up to see two police officers hovering over me, accusing me of breaking the law for not actively exercising. They were also intimidating, threatening to arrest me when I asked if I could start exercising now that I knew what the law was," unquote. No luck. Mr. Chin continues, quote, "I used the Revenue New South Wales portal to challenge my ticket. The fine was clearly mistaken, so I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Revenue's response stated that I was in the park with no reasonable excuse, which contradicted the public health order in force defining reasonable excuse as exercise or recreation," unquote. He writes, "It doesn't take a legal background to see that or outdoor recreation has no meaning if it doesn't mean something other than exercise." So he says, "I challenged the ticket in court." 2 months later, Mr. Chin hadn't heard anything from the prosecution, so he called the court and they'd heard nothing. So he called the General Police line and was eventually connected with the officer who had issued the ticket and had harassed him. Mr. Chin explained what he was seeking, and to his surprise, the officer said, "Mate, I gave out a lot of tickets then." Well, Mr. Chin emailed the policeman who issued the public health order on the day he was fined, to which he received a reply that the ticket had been withdrawn. The system had failed at every level, as Mr. Chin says, shockingly imbalanced against accused people without means. Well, why am I saying this? Well, not by coincidence. One of the plaintiffs in a New South Wales Supreme Court case has had his $1,000 fine withdrawn. 30-year-old Rowan Pank sued the New South Wales Police Commissioner and the Commissioner of Fines Administration after they refused to cancel a fine that he was given for sitting in a park in August 2021 whilst Sydney was in lockdown. Again, within a kilometre of his home, the police approached him and said the fine was given because he was not actively exercising. He sought 2 reviews of the fine. Both were rejected. But shortly after the court case was filed and served last Thursday, the fine was withdrawn. No reasons were given. There are 45,000 more unpaid fines out there. Clearly a significant number of them may be invalid. The penalty notices in many cases don't provide enough detail as requested under the Fines Act. The lack of detail makes it difficult to challenge the fines in court because it doesn't point to a specific offence. The reality is that the validity of COVID-19 fines issued across New South Wales must now be called into question, and millions of dollars worth of penalty notices issued during lockdowns could be invalidated. Now remember, many of these fines were issued to people in lower socioeconomic areas. In other words, tackle the low-hanging fruit, and also First Nations people. Isn't this precisely what Senator Antich was saying last night about the relentless incursions into the lives and liberty of people during coronavirus? There is a new government in Australia. It had better understand that the trust Australians once had in government institutions is at an all-time low. And the government of New South Wales had better understand that if it continues this assault on the lives and liberties of ordinary residents, then its hold on government will be short-lived. If you received a fine or a penalty notice and paid it, check with your lawyer. It most probably didn't provide the detail as required under the Fines Act. Bureaucracy buckled in the case of Mr. Chin. Don't imagine it won't buckle for you as well.